She had exactly $6.40. She counted it once, then again, then a third time, slowly, deliberately, the way you count something when you already know the answer. But you are hoping the numbers will somehow rearrange themselves if you just look long enough. They didn't. $6.40. It was a Tuesday evening in November. The kind of cold that doesn't make a fuss about itself. It doesn't howl or storm or demand attention. It just settles quietly, deeply, the way grief settles, the way loneliness settles, into the parts of you that you've stopped trying to warm. The gas station on Clearwater Road was ordinary in every way. Fluorescent lights that hummed and flickered, a cracked concrete forecourt, a hand-lettered sign in the window advertising a coffee and pastry deal that no one seemed to be taking advantage of, 2 pumps on one side, 3 on the other, the smell of fuel and cold air and something faintly sweet from the dumpster around the back. Her name was Serena, 28 years old, single mother. 1 son, 14 months old, name of Eli, currently at home with her neighbor Miss Gloria, probably already reaching for things he wasn't supposed to reach for, and charming his way out of consequences with the devastating smile he had been born with, but had clearly decided to use as a primary life strategy. The pale blue shirt from the commercial cleaning company she worked for, Henderson Contract Services, Est, 1987. The logo a little faded now from washing. There was a bleach stain near the collar that she had scrubbed at so many times. The fabric had gone thin there, almost translucent, and she had stopped scrubbing because she was more afraid of making a hole than living with the stain. Her hair was pulled back in a bun that had started the day neat, and was now held together more by determination than by the 2 pins still in it. Her shoes were sensible and worn at the heel. Her coat was a size too big. It had been her grandmother's, and she had kept it not because it fit perfectly, but because it still, if she was honest with herself, smelled faintly of the lavender talcum powder Nana Ruth had kept on her dresser. She was tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. You know that kind of tired. It is not about the body, it is about the weight. The accumulated compounding weight of doing everything yourself for a very long time, of being the only person who stands between your child and the world, of solving every problem with whatever is in your hands at the time, and then getting up the next morning to do it again. She needed $8. 6 for a half tank, enough to get to work and back tomorrow, and the day after if she drove carefully and avoided the highway, and $2 more for formula. A small can, the store brand one on the bottom shelf that she had stopped feeling embarrassed about because embarrassment is a luxury, and she had learned to spend only on necessities. $6.40. She stood in the aisle and looked at the formula for a long moment. It was a very ordinary moment. She was not crying, she was not trembling. She did not look like a woman in crisis, because she had learned that crises are less dramatic than people imagine, and more like this, a quiet calculation in a gas station aisle at 7:40 in the evening, a woman doing math with her body very still. She put the formula back, just the gas then. She would sort the formula tomorrow. Tomorrow was where she kept everything she couldn't carry today. It had become a very crowded shelf tomorrow, but it had never collapsed yet, and she had learned to trust it. She walked to the register. She counted out her coins onto the counter. She did not look up. She did not notice the black SUV on the other side of pump 3. She did not notice the man sitting inside it, who had stopped talking mid-sentence into his phone and was watching her with an expression he would not have been able to explain if you had asked him. She paid, she pumped her gas, she got back in her car and drove home. He sat in his car for a little longer than necessary. And what happened after that, what slowly, quietly, painfully unfolded over the weeks and months that followed, is not the kind of story that arrives with fanfare. It is the kind of story that arrives the way the most important things do, unexpectedly, in the cold, under flickering lights, in the space between a decision and a regret. This is Serena and Damien's story. Stay with it. Because I promise you, by the time we reach the end, something in you is going to feel different than it did when we started. Before we go any further, pause for just a second. Where are you right now? Are you in bed with your phone propped against a pillow? Are you on a couch somewhere with a cup of something warm? Are you in a car parked listening? Wherever you are, drop it in the comments, just your city, just a hello. We read every single one, and it means more than you know. And if this is your first time finding us and something about these first few minutes already has you feeling something, please subscribe right now before the story takes you and you forget. We are here every week with stories like this one. Stories about ordinary people in extraordinary moments. Stories about the kind of love that doesn't arrive the way the movies promised. It would. It arrives quietly, at gas stations, at midnight. In hospital waiting rooms, in the space between two people who weren't looking for anything and found everything. Hit subscribe, leave a comment, and let's go back to Serena. To understand why that evening at the gas station mattered, you have to understand what Serena's life looked like from the inside. No, from the outside, from the inside. Because from the outside, you might just see a tired young woman in a bleach-stained uniform counting coins. And that would be accurate, as far as it went. But it would miss everything important. Serena had grown up in a small house on Pickett Street with her grandmother, Nana Ruth. Her mother had left when Serena was 7 years old, not with a fight, not with a scene, not with any of the drama that might have at least provided something to hold on to. She had simply not come home one evening. Serena had waited by the window until Nana Ruth had come and gently drawn the curtain and said, in her low, firm voice, "Come eat, baby." And that had been that. No explanation then. No explanation ever. What Nana Ruth had given her instead was this: the understanding that you cannot control what other people do. You can only control what you do next. You get up, you eat, you go to school. You try, you keep trying. No, because the world owes you anything for trying, but because the alternative is to stop, and stopping is not something the women in this family do. Serena had carried that with her like a compass. She had done well enough in school, not brilliantly, because brilliance requires a particular kind of leisure, the freedom to think without the low hum of anxiety underneath every thought, and she had never fully had that. But she had done well enough. She had started a business administration program at Cartwright Community College at 22, working evenings to pay for it, telling herself that this was the beginning of the version of her life she was building toward. Then she had met Daniel. Daniel was the kind of charming that looks, in the beginning, exactly like warmth. He paid attention, he remembered things she'd said. He talked about the future with the easy confidence of someone who has never doubted they would have one, and being around that confidence had felt, to Serena, like standing near something warm when you've been cold for a long time. She had leaned toward it. She had been 25 when she found out she was pregnant. She had not planned it. She had not planned it, either. It had simply happened, the way certain things happen in lives that are being lived at full speed, with not quite enough margin for error. She had told Daniel on a Wednesday evening. She remembered the specific quality of the silence that followed, the way it lasted just a beat too long to be okay, the way his face had arranged itself into something careful and neutral, the way she had known immediately and completely what was coming. He had left 3 weeks later. Serena had sat with that for exactly one evening. She had allowed herself one evening of feeling the full weight of it, the betrayal, the humiliation, the particular cold of being left when you are most vulnerable. She had sat on the bathroom floor and let herself feel all of it. Then she had gotten up. Nana Ruth had died 8 months before Eli was born. A stroke, sudden, on a Sunday morning in April. There had been no warning. There had been no goodbye. One day she was there, and then she wasn't, and Serena had stood at her graveside with her hand on her own stomach, 5 months along, and made a quiet private promise to the woman in the ground that she would raise this baby the way she had been raised, with love and with backbone and with the deep, persistent understanding that you keep going. Eli had been born on a warm evening in December, 6 pounds 4 ounces, a full head of dark hair and eyes that seemed, even in those first hours, to be paying very close attention to everything. Serena had held him against her chest in the hospital room, alone, the nurse having stepped out, the room quiet except for the soft sounds of new life, and she had felt something she didn't have a word for. No, happiness, exactly, something bigger and more frightening than happiness. something that felt like purpose made physical. Like all of the striving and endurance and getting up again had been pointing toward this specific weight in her arms. She had whispered to him, "It is just us, baby, but just us is enough." She had meant it then, she still meant it. The cleaning job had come through a notice tacked to the community board outside the laundromat. Henderson Contract Services hiring immediately, no experience required evening, shifts available, $13 an hour. No, enough, never quite enough, but it was work, and it was regular, and her supervisor, Miss Patterson, was a no-nonsense woman of 50 who had 3 grown children and very little tolerance for excuses and a deep, carefully concealed streak of fairness that Serena had come to rely on. The apartment was on the 4th floor of a building on Renner Street. It smelled faintly of the previous tenant's cooking, something spiced, something that had soaked into the walls over years, and the radiator made a clanging sound in winter like a small animal trapped inside trying to get out. The windows were drafty. The elevator broke down roughly once a month. She had decorated it with what she had. A print she'd found at a thrift store, a painting of the ocean, warm blues and greens, hung above the small sofa. Ely's corner had a second-hand crib she had repainted white herself, a mobile she had made from cardboard and string and 3 small toys, and a rug she had found at a church sale that was slightly too big for the space, but which Ely had immediately claimed as his primary territory for sitting and investigating objects. There were photos on the refrigerator, held by magnets. Eli at 1 month, asleep on her chest. Eli at 6 months, laughing at something off camera. Nana Ruth, in her kitchen, unposed, not looking at the camera, her hands in a bowl of dough, her expression one of pure absorbed contentment. It was a small life, but it was hers, and she had built it, and she was proud of it in the quiet way she was proud of most things, without needing anyone to witness the pride. Miss Gloria was her next-door neighbor, 67, originally from a small town in the south, half-deaf in her left ear, which she compensated for by paying fierce attention with everything else. She had taken one look at Serena and I in their first week in the building, and announced without preamble that she would watch the baby on evenings Serena worked, and that she would not hear any argument about it, and that the only payment she required was that Serena bring her a cup of that tea. She had pointed at the box in Serena's grocery bag whenever she had spare. Serena had brought her tea every week since. Miss Gloria called Eli a little prince and sang to him in a low, tuneless, deeply sincere voice, and Eli received these songs the way he received everything Miss Gloria did, with complete and utter trust, his small body going still and attentive, his eyes fixed on her face. This was the life, small, hard, held together with determination and love, and the particular ingenuity of a woman who has learned to solve problems with what she has. No glamorous. No, what she had imagined at 22, sitting in her community college class, thinking about the future. But real, deeply, fully real. And on a cold Tuesday evening in November, this real life had brought her to a gas station with $6.40 in her palm, and had placed her, without her knowledge, in the sight line of a man who had everything and felt nothing, and was about to feel something for the very first time in years. Damien Ashford was 42 years old, and he was, by every measurable standard, a success. Ashford Capital occupied floors 34 through 42 of the glass-fronted building on Mercer Street that bore his name on a small brushed steel plaque beside the entrance, not large, not ostentatious, just precise. The company managed assets across commercial real estate, technology acquisition, and private equity. It had been built over 17 years from a modest inheritance, his father's, a man he had respected more than loved and mourned more than he expected when he died, into something that financial journalists described with words like formidable and exacting and occasionally ruthless, which Damien considered imprecise. He was not ruthless. Ruthlessness implied emotion, implied wanting to harm. He simply had very clear priorities and very little patience for anything that did not serve them. He had grown up in a household that valued achievement in the way some households value faith, as the organizing principle, the measure of worth, the answer to most questions. His father had been a banker. His mother had been a lawyer before she retired. Dinner-table conversation had tended toward the analytical. Feelings were not dismissed. Exactly. They were simply not particularly on the agenda. He had been a serious child, a serious student, a serious young man. He had done everything in the right order and done it well, and by 30 he had more money than most people accumulate in a lifetime, and by 35 he had more than most people can meaningfully imagine, and somewhere between 30 and 35 the part of him that had once known what he was working toward had gone very quiet. He had been engaged once. Catherine had been a curator at a contemporary art museum downtown, warm, perceptive, the kind of person who remembered the small things and gave them the weight they deserved. She had loved him with a generosity that he had been genuinely aware of and not entirely able to receive. He had not been cruel to her. He had been absent, present in body, scheduled in affection, dependable in the logistical sense, and fundamentally, consistently, not quite. There she had ended it on a Sunday afternoon in his apartment, standing at the window with her back to him, looking out over the city. She had said, "I don't think you are here, Damien. I don't think you know how to be here. And I can't keep being in love with someone who is always somewhere else." He had said, "I am standing right in front of you." She had turned around and looked at him with something that was sadness, and something that was exhaustion, and something, underneath both, that was the particular grief of someone who has tried and understood. Finally, that trying is not enough. "That is what I mean," she had said. She had been gone within the hour. That had been 4 years ago. He had not been in a relationship since. He had not, if he was honest, and he rarely examined the question closely enough to be honest about it, particularly missed the relationship, which told him something he preferred not to examine about what kind of partner he had been. His days had a structure that bordered on the ceremonial. He was in the office by 6:45. He worked through until whenever the work was done, which was usually late. He slept in a penthouse apartment on the 41st floor of a building 12 minutes from the office. The commute had been a factor in choosing it, which told you something about his priorities at the time. The apartment was large and beautiful and almost entirely impersonal. There were no photographs on the walls. The surfaces were clear. His housekeeper, a woman named Beverly who came 3 times a week, and who had the particular warmth of someone who has decided to be fond of a difficult person, had once told her daughter that cleaning for Mr. Ashford was the strangest job she'd ever had because it never actually looked like anyone lived there. He ate at his desk more often than not. He had a driver named Marcus, steady, discreet, a man of few words who Damien trusted entirely and communicated with primarily in very brief sentences that Marcus had learned to decode. He had friends in the technical sense, people he had known a long time, people he had dinner with twice a year and calls with occasionally, people who knew the outer shape of his life, but not its interior. If it could be said to have one, he did not, as a general rule, notice strangers. He did not stop at gas stations. He had Marcus for that. But on the Tuesday in November, when everything shifted, Marcus had called in sick, genuinely sick, a fact Damien had verified with a brief, efficient concern, and Damien had driven himself for the first time in months. He had been deep in a call, a 9-figure acquisition in its final stages, the kind of conversation that required his complete and undivided attention. When the fuel light had come on, and he had pulled into the nearest station on autopilot without interrupting the call, he had stayed in the car with the engine off. Still talking. That was when he saw her, the counting. There was something about it that pulled at something in him, the way almost nothing pulled at anything in him anymore. The deliberateness of it, the careful, private arithmetic of it. He watched her count the coins from one palm to the other. He watched her look up at the shelf. He watched her hand reach toward the formula and then stop, and he watched the quality of the pause. Not hesitation, he understood immediately, but calculation. She already knew the answer. She was just arriving at it. He watched her put it back. She did it without drama, without a visible reaction, without any of the visible distress that would have made it easier to look away. She just put it back and went to the register and counted her coins onto the counter with the same steady precision and the fluorescent light flickered once overhead, and she didn't look up. Something happened in Damien Ashford's chest. He could not have named it. He was not accustomed to his chest doing things without his permission. It was sharp and sudden and uncomfortable, like the moment when you step off a curb in the dark and expect ground and find air, a lurch, a catch, a sudden awareness of gravity. He ended the call Saturday for a moment, got out of the car, walked into the station, told the cashier quietly to add $40 to whatever the woman in the blue shirt was paying, walked back out, got in his car, drove away. He told himself it was an anomaly, a momentary lapse into sentimentality. He told himself he had seen an inefficiency, a problem with a clear and available solution, and resolved it the way he resolved everything. He almost believed himself. But that night, in his empty, pristine apartment, he stood at the window looking out at the city for a long time. He was not thinking about the acquisition. He was not reviewing numbers in his head the way he usually did when he stood at this window. He was thinking about a woman counting coins under a flickering light, and the particular specific way she had put the formula back. No defeated, no broken, just carrying something quietly. Alone, he stood at the window for a long time. 3 weeks later, in early December, Serena's supervisor, Miss Patterson, called her into the small back office at Henderson Contract Services and told her she was being reassigned. New contract, corporate premises on Mercer Street, executive floors, 36th through 38th, Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 in the evening, slightly better rate, per hour than her current assignment. Serena said thank you and wrote down the address and thought nothing more of it. She didn't know whose building it was. She didn't follow business news and had no particular reason to have heard of Ashford Capital. She knew which surfaces showed fingerprints and which floors needed careful mopping, where the wax had built up near the elevator banks. And she knew by the second week that the executive bathroom on the 38th floor had a soap dispenser with a faulty mechanism that needed a firm press and hold rather than a quick push. And she knew that whoever worked in the corner office, the big one, with the view of the whole city, drank an extraordinary amount of coffee and had a very precise system of organizing his desk that she was careful never to disturb. She moved through the building the way she moved through everything, efficiently, quietly, taking up exactly the space required, and no more. For the first 2 weeks, she never encountered him. He was always gone before she arrived. In the third week, he wasn't. She was in the corridor outside the main boardroom, mopping in long, even strokes, her earbuds in, something low and quiet playing. When the boardroom door opened, she pulled out one earbud and stepped aside. He came out and stopped. They looked at each other. There was a beat, the kind that is almost too short to measure but somehow contains a great deal. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something she couldn't quite read, the sense on his face of almost recognition. "I didn't realize anyone was still here," he said. His voice was low. Even, he had the voice of someone who was used to rooms going quiet when he spoke. "I'll be out of your way," she said, and turned back to her work. He stood there for slightly longer than necessary. Then he walked to the elevator. The doors closed. Serena put her earbud back in. She thought nothing of it, Damien. In the elevator, thought of nothing else for the remainder of the evening. He was in his car, Marcus driving, heading home along the river road when it came to him. Slowly, then all at once. The blue shirt. The pale blue shirt with the company logo on the breast pocket, Clearwater Road, the coins, the formula put carefully back on the shelf. He sat very still in the back seat. Marcus, who had been driving Damien for 6 years and had developed a finely calibrated sensitivity to the quality of his silences, glanced in the rear-view mirror once and said nothing. The next morning, Damien opened the vendor contract file for the first time since it had been filed. He read it carefully. He then called his operations manager, a precise and efficient woman named Harriet, and told her he wanted a general review of all vendor contracts, service staff, cleaning, maintenance, building support, with a view to benchmarking rates against current market standards. Harriet said, "Of course, any particular driver for this? It is long overdue." he said, which was true. It was also not the reason. It was a Friday in the second week of December when Serena first let him see her. No, deliberately. No, by choice. She had gotten the call at 7:47. Miss Gloria. A fall, not serious. Miss Gloria's niece had been there and had gotten her settled, but she had sounded shaken on the phone, and Eli had been crying in the background, and Miss Gloria had said, in her most careful and composed voice, which Serena had learned to recognize as the voice that meant she was trying not to alarm you, "He is fine, sweetheart. He just wants his mama." Serena had 2 floors still to complete. She called Miss Patterson. Miss Patterson reminded her, not unkindly, that this was the second early finish in 6 weeks, and that it would need to go in the log. Serena said she understood, and ended the call and stood in the corridor with her trolley and breathed very carefully through her nose for approximately 10 seconds. Then she began moving faster, trying to get through as much as she could before she had to leave. She was on the 38th floor, moving quickly, when the elevator opened. Damien, he had come back for something. A file, a detail he needed to check before the morning, the kind of thing that pulled him back to the office at 8 in the evening on a Friday as a matter of ordinary routine. He saw her immediately. The difference in her movement, the tension across her shoulders, the particular quality of someone holding something together through deliberate will. He stopped. "Is everything all right?" She almost didn't answer. The boundary was clear, and she kept it clear. Her personal life was her own. It did not belong in this corridor. But there was something about the question, direct, unadorned, no softness around it, just the plain fact of it, that caught her. "My son," she said, not stopping her work. "He is with my neighbor," and she fell. "He is okay. She is okay. I just need to get there." A pause. "How old is he?" 14 months. He was quiet for a moment. "Go," he said. "I have 2 floors. Go," he said again. No, louder, no, sharper, just, certain, the voice of someone making a decision. "I'll speak to your supervisor in the morning. You'll have a full shift noted." She stopped and looked at him. He looked back. "I don't need you to." "I know," he said. "Go to your son." She left. He stood in the empty corridor for a moment. Then he walked to his office and sat down at his desk and looked at the financial projections on his screen and did not read a single line of them for the next 20 minutes. It was a Wednesday in mid-December. The coldest night so far. Serena was on the 37th floor when her phone rang. It was not Miss Gloria's number. It was the hospital. Miss Gloria had been found by her neighbor at 5:30. A serious fall this time, hip fracture, ambulance surgery likely in the morning. "Stable," the voice said carefully, but she was asking for Serena. The world narrowed very quickly to a single point. Serena called the building's front desk, told them she needed to leave immediately, grabbed her bag and her coat, and ran 4 flights of stairs, through the lobby, 6 blocks at something close to a run, to her car. She drove to Renner Street first for Eli, who was being watched by Mrs. Okafor from the 2nd floor, a solid and sensible woman who had taken one look at Serena's face and pressed Eli into her arms without a single unnecessary word. Eli looked at his mother with his large attentive eyes and pressed his open palm flat against her cheek. He did this sometimes when she was upset, when the air around her was different. He would reach up and place his whole small hand flat against her face, as if checking whether she was still there, as if grounding both of them. She pressed her face into his neck for a moment and breathed. Then she strapped him into his car seat and drove to the hospital. The emergency waiting area at 10:15 on a Wednesday night was exactly what you would expect, fluorescent, loud in a hushed way, smelling of industrial cleaner and something underneath it that no cleaner can fully reach. Serena sat in a row of plastic chairs, with Eli in her lap. He was tired but not sleeping, looking around at everything with his wide, interested gaze, occasionally making the soft, investigative sounds he made when he was cataloguing new information. Serena was not fine. She was holding it together in the way she held everything together, with structure, with forward motion, with the disciplined refusal to let herself feel the full weight of what she was carrying until there was a time and place that could hold it. But her hands were not entirely steady, and the calculation she was running in the back of her mind, Tomorrow's childcare, the shifts she couldn't miss, the question of who would visit Miss Gloria, who had no close family in the city, was the kind of calculation that only runs when someone is keeping the fear at bay with logistics. She did not hear the door. She did not notice the figure crossing the waiting room. She noticed him when he was standing directly in front of her. Damien, dark coat, no tie, hair slightly different from the office, less composed. In his hand, a coffee cup from the place across the street, the steam visible in the cold air he'd carried in with him. She stared at him. "How did you?" Marcus was nearby. "He saw you running out of the building." He set the coffee down on the empty seat beside her. His voice was its usual even low register. "I didn't know if you'd eaten anything. I didn't know which hospital. I called 3. A pause. "I wasn't sure if I should come." She looked at the coffee. She looked at him. Something behind her eyes shifted. No, tears. She wasn't crying. Something quieter than that. The small, significant movement of a wall meeting, something it wasn't built to resist. "You didn't have to," she said. "I know," he said. He sat down, 2 seats away. No close. He didn't reach toward Eli. He didn't offer anything else. He didn't say "it is going to be okay," or "I am sure she'll be fine," or any of the other phrases that people say in waiting rooms when they want to make themselves feel more useful than the situation allows. He simply sat there, present. Eli, who had been restless, turned his head and looked at the quiet man 2 seats away with the focused, unself-conscious attention that very small children bring to the business of assessing people. He looked at him for a long moment. Then he extended his arm, pointing at Damien with one authoritative finger, and said with complete conviction, "Up." "Eli," Serena started, but Damien had already leaned forward, slowly, carefully, with the specific, visible uncertainty of someone who has not held a small child before and is approaching the task with genuine seriousness and no pretense of experience. He reached out. Eli grabbed his hands with both of his and used them as traction to haul himself into the available lap with the practiced efficiency of a baby who knows exactly how to get where he wants to go. He settled, put his head against Damien's chest, looked up at him once with those serious eyes, and then closed them. The change in Damien's face was something Serena would remember for the rest of her life. It was a loosening. That is the only word for it. Something in the structure of his expression, a particular controlled precision that she had come to recognize as his default, simply came undone. No, dramatically no, with any visible emotion, just open, the way a fist opens. The way a room looks when you pull back all the curtains at once. He looked down at the small sleeping weight on his chest, and his expression was unguarded and searching and something else, something that had no name yet, but that was the beginning of a name, something being reached for from very far away. He didn't speak, neither did she. They sat in that waiting room for 2 hours and 17 minutes. Miss Gloria's surgery was confirmed for the morning. Prognosis good, but recovery would be long. Damien got them both more coffee at midnight without asking. At 12:30 he looked at Serena, her eyes heavy, Eli deeply asleep across both of them now, his small legs on her lap and his head still on Damien's, and said quietly, "Let me drive you home." She almost said no. She didn't say no. He carried Eli up 4 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken, again, and did it without comment, without sighing, without any performance of the inconvenience. He laid him in his cot with a carefulness that was almost unbearable to watch. This precise, controlled man moving with a slowness and delicacy that had no transaction in it, no efficiency, nothing that served any purpose except the purpose of not waking a sleeping child. He straightened up. He turned around. Serena was leaning against the doorframe watching him with an expression she didn't entirely bother to conceal. "Thank you," she said softly, "for all of it." He nodded once. He left. He sat in his car outside her building. Marcus, who had come to collect him, sat in the front and said nothing and looked straight ahead like the professional he was. 11 minutes passed. Damien started the engine. "Home," he said. "Yes, sir," said Marcus. He left her alone after that. No coldly, no deliberately. Out of something more complicated, a recognition he didn't entirely trust himself to act on correctly. He understood systems, he understood how things worked. He did not understand what was happening inside him when he thought about Serena, and Damien had learned long ago that the things he did not understand were the things most likely to be mishandled. So he worked, he kept the hours he always kept, he ran the meetings he always ran. He made the decisions that needed making and deferred the ones that could wait, and closed the acquisition in January for $1.2 billion, which his board celebrated with a dinner he attended and found flat and left early. He walked past the clean corridors on his late evenings and told himself she had already gone, and mostly she had. He arranged for the vendor contract adjustments quietly through Harriet. Better rates across all evening, shift cleaning staff, a general review. Harriet raised an eyebrow so fractionally it was almost invisible, and said, "Of course," and asked no further questions, because Harriet was very good at her job. He thought about Ely. Specifically, he thought about the weight, the specific anchoring weight of a small sleeping child who had chosen him without hesitation or qualification or any assessment of his net worth or his ability to feel things, who had simply said up and meant it, and had gone to sleep on him with the absolute undefended trust of something that has never been given a reason not to trust. He thought about it more than he thought was reasonable. He thought about it late at night in his silent apartment, standing at the window above the city, and he recognized it for what it was with the clear-eyed honesty that had always been one of his better qualities when he chose to apply it to himself. He was afraid. No. Of Serena. No. Of Eli. Of himself, of what he would do with something real if he had it. Of whether he was capable of being present in the way she deserved. Not scheduled present, not logistically present, but actually entirely. Show up at the hospital at 10:45 present. He had done that once. He did not entirely trust that he could sustain it. He had not sustained it before. So he kept his distance. And Serena, who had her own reasons for caution, her own history of people who left, kept hers. It was a Thursday in late January when they finally stopped keeping distance. She was cleaning the corridor, and he came out of his office, and instead of the brief nod and continued walking that had become their wordless arrangement, he stopped. "How is he?" he asked. "Your son." "He is well," she said. "He has been asking about you." He looked surprised. "Asking about me?" "He calls you up, man," she said. "He points at the door sometimes, like he is expecting you." Something moved at the corner of his mouth, a contained thing, almost a smile, and Miss Gloria, home. "Recovering, she is already told Eli. He needs to visit twice a day for the rest of winter." A pause. "She has opinions about his diet. She sounds formidable." "She is the most formidable person I've ever met," Serena said, "and I include myself in that, which is saying something." This time the smile arrived, small, caught off guard, real. She looked at him. "You adjusted the contract," she said. It was not a question. A pause. There was a general vendor review. Damien, his name in her voice, the first time she had used it. They both registered it. "Yes," he said. She considered him for a moment. "I want to ask you something," she said, "and I want you to answer it honestly, all right." "What is this?" She gestured simply at the space between them. "What are you doing?" He was quiet for a longer moment than she expected. "I am not entirely sure," he said. "I've been trying to understand it since the gas station." "The gas station," she said. "You put back a $2 can of formula," he said. "And something happened that I haven't had a good explanation for since, and everything I've done since then has been an attempt to be near something that I can't fully account for." The corridor was very still. "I am not a project," she said carefully. "I want you to know that clearly I am not something to be fixed or improved or gonized." "I know that," he said. "I have a son. I have a life that is full and complicated and doesn't have space in it for something that is going to not be real." "I know," he said again. "Do you? Because you are used to leaving when things become inconvenient. Everything in your life is structured to allow you to leave." He looked at her for a long moment. "No, this," he said. 2 words, simple, without elaboration or defense. They stood in the corridor and something settled between them, Not resolved, not agreed upon, but acknowledged, placed on the table, visible. "I am off on Saturday," she said eventually. "There is a park 2 blocks from my apartment. Eli is obsessed with the ducks. They genuinely terrify him, but he can't stay away." A pause. "What time?" he said. 10 o'clock. "I'll be there," he said. He was there at 9:55. He was wearing regular clothes. Dark jeans, a plain coat, good boots, no driver. He had taken the subway for the first time in approximately 4 years, which had involved a brief consultation with Marcus about which line and which stop, conducted with the seriousness of a man planning a significant operation, which Marcus had found privately very moving. He looked, Serena thought when she saw him, like a man who had made a deliberate and considered effort to show up as a person, rather than a position. Eli saw him from across the path. "UP man," he shouted. It was full-throated and joyful and entirely without self-consciousness, the way 14-month-olds announce things, as though the information is important and the volume is the only appropriate scale. Damien crouched down. Ellie ran at him. He ran with the total committed momentum of a small child who has never considered the possibility of not being caught. No assessment, no hesitation, just the absolute certainty of being received. Damien caught him, lifted him, held him out at arm's length, and looked at his face, round and bright-eyed and beaming with the specific satisfaction of a child who has arrived exactly where he intended. And Eli immediately grabbed Damien's nose with both hands, squeezed it, and laughed with his whole body at what he clearly considered to be an excellent joke. Damien smiled. No, the small, contained one. No, the almost smile from the corridor, a full one, surprised out of him, unguarded, real, the smile of someone who had forgotten they could do this and had just remembered. Serena watched it happen and felt something settle in her chest. No, a rush, no, a fall, something quieter and more permanent than those things. The specific peace of recognizing something true. They walked for 2 hours. Eli directed the route toward the ducks' approach, away from the ducks' strategic retreat, toward a puddle investigation, away from the puddle, Serena's intervention, toward a pigeon that Eli regarded with profound suspicion and tracked across 30 meters of path before the pigeon departed, and Eli stood looking after it with an expression of deep philosophical unease. Damien followed, where he led with a patience that appeared entirely unforced. They talked more freely than they ever had in the office corridor. She told him about Nana Ruth. He told her about his father, the respect and the distance and the grief that had surprised him. She laughed at his description of his first deal. At 25, convinced he was going to fail. "You don't look like someone who has ever thought they were going to fail," she said. "I looked like that for years," he said. "I got very good at not looking like it, and then the looking like it and the being became hard to tell apart." She was quiet for a moment. "What do you feel right now?" she asked. He looked at Eli, who had crouched down to examine something on the path with the focused, grave attention of a scientist examining a significant specimen. "Something I don't have a complete word for yet," he said. "But it is not nothing." He turned to look at her. "It hasn't been nothing since Clearwater Road." She held his gaze. "It wasn't nothing for me either," she said quietly. Eli looked up from his specimen, noted that the adults were doing something boring, and returned to his investigation. The sun was out. The ducks were on the water. The path was cold under their feet and the air smelled like winter, and something green underneath, the first faint suggestion of what was coming. It was a very ordinary morning. It was the beginning of everything. Love, when it arrived for Serena and Damien, did not arrive the way it does in stories. It did not arrive in grand gestures or rooftop declarations, or the kind of sweeping, cinematic certainty that arrives pre-scored with music. It arrived the way the most real things arrive, in increments, in small moments, in the accumulation of ordinary evidence. It arrived in the book he left on her cart one Tuesday evening. No note, never a note, just a book, something he had read and thought she might like, which she always did. She started leaving post-it notes on his office door in return. A single sentence written quickly, something Eli had done that day, Something small and funny and specific, because she had noticed that those things made him more present, more human, more himself than anything else she had seen. It arrived in the evening she brought Eli to meet Miss Gloria, who sat across from Damien in her living room, and examined him for a full 5 minutes without speaking, while he sat very still and endured the examination with the seriousness he brought to all important things. Miss Gloria then nodded once, with the finality of a judge, delivering a verdict, and said, "You'll do." And the expression on Damien's face, a quiet, genuine relief, as though he had passed the most important assessment of his career, was the most human she had ever seen him. It arrived in the evening she fell asleep on his sofa. They had been watching a film, something she had chosen, something he had watched with the focused attention of a man determined to understand why she liked what she liked, and she had gone under between one scene and the next, without meaning to. When she woke, she was covered with the blanket from the chair, the television was off, and he was sitting in the armchair across the room reading, the lamp on, the room quiet. He was simply there, no doing anything useful, no working, just present, in the particular piece of someone who has found somewhere they want to be. It arrived in the morning. He called her at 7 a.m., which he had never done, to tell her the sunrise from his window was the same color as the scarf she had worn on Saturday. She was quiet on the other end of the line for a moment. "Damien," she said. "Yes." "That is the most beautiful thing you've ever said to me." A pause. "I have considerable ground to make up," he said. "You have time," she said. A year later, almost to the day, Damien drove past the gas station on Clearwater Road. He pulled in. He had a full tank. He parked on the same side of the same pump, in the same spot where he had sat that Tuesday evening in November, with his phone to his ear and his eyes on a stranger counting coins in her palm. He sat with the engine off for a while. He thought about the man he had been then. He had been successful and certain and completely, efficiently empty. He had built a life so thoroughly structured around achievement that there had been no gap in it anywhere for anything that couldn't be measured. He had been, as Catherine had said, somewhere else, always somewhere else. He thought about the woman who had not looked up, who had put back a $2 can of formula with the quiet dignity of someone who has been carrying things alone for a very long time and has made peace with the weight, who had said to him in a hospital corridor, "I am not a project," who had looked at him in the park on a cold Saturday morning and said simply, "It wasn't nothing for me either." He took out his phone. He called her. She answered on the third ring. He could hear Eli in the background, chattering, emphatic, narrating something at length and with great conviction, the way he did now at 2.5, full of words and opinions and the beautiful, uncontainable life of a small person discovering that everything in the world is interesting. "Hey," she said, "everything okay?" "I am at the gas station," he said. "The one on Clearwater Road." A pause. "Why?" she asked softly. "I wanted to see it again," he said. "I wanted to remember what everything looked like before." A long quiet "and," she said. Her voice was careful and gentle and entirely her. He looked at the forecourt, the pumps, the flickering fluorescent light above the entrance, still flickering a year later, as though nothing had changed, as though time did not move in ordinary places, only in people. "It looks like the most important place I've ever been," he said. He heard her breath catch. "A moment," she said. He started the engine. "I am on my way," he said.